Welcome to What Was He Thinking? My name is A.B. Bracewell. Today I'm going to be your personal tour guide through a man's psyche. Take this journey as we explore why a man thinks the way he thinks, why a man acts the way he acts, and why a man feels the way he feels. No questions off limits, and no topics too hard. By the end of the show, you'll have a better insight and a better understanding of who we are as men. This season on What Was He Thinking? We're going to be talking about sex. And not any old regular type of sex. We're going to be focusing on the sexual education of Black men in America. We're going to be looking into the thoughts about sex, our behaviors towards sex, our habits, and the way that Black men learn about sex. We're going to be focusing on how we develop our feelings and our emotions towards sex, and how that impacts the way we approach relationships and deal with love. So I have some good brothers with me that I brought along to help me discuss this topic. The first brother that I have is Isaac Bethay. Isaac is a therapist. He specializes in marriage and family therapy. He's a friend. He's a co-worker. And, you know, I just been having a pleasure of getting to build a relationship with this young man. The next brother I want to introduce he's one of the top sought after real estate agents in the city of Philadelphia. He's selling properties all over the place. It's so hard to catch up with this guy. Every time I try to reach out to him, he has another showing, another sale. Another good friend of mine that I've been having the pleasure to get to know over the past couple of years. And we actually used to do a event together about relationships here in the Philadelphia area. Mr. Damian Roberts, welcome. And my next brother, he probably needs no introduction. You might have seen his show, My Brother, My Brother. He's the founder, CEO of this great organization that's all about building men up, empowering men, giving them strength and giving them encouragement, and just providing a platform where men can express their thoughts, their feelings, and their emotions in a way that I haven't seen before. Please welcome my brother, Maurice Rush. Okay, so we're just going to jump right into it. We're not going to beat around the bush. We got a lot of questions to cover, a lot of information to share. The first question I have for you guys is, where did you learn about sex? Where did you learn about sex? Isaac?
So I think my first exposure to sex was on the internet. Porn, I guess I would have to say. Just probably doing some homework or schoolwork or just surfing the internet for something probably innocent. Pop-up came up. I followed the hole down the hole and saw some videos. Probably was around 12 or so.
Okay. Damien, what about you? The same question. Where was your first exposure? Where did you learn about it?
Oh, the first exposure that I remember was when my parents were separated. My parents were married. They were separated at one point. They got back together, and then eventually they got a divorce. But the separation happened when I was about, I don't know, probably about 5 or 6 years old. And I think that it was the 70s, you know, and so my mom, I think, was really trying to be progressive as far as, you know, sex and sexuality was concerned. She wanted us to actually know, you know, what was involved with sex and all this. So I remember there was this book, and it had, you know, information about the body parts and you know, sex and sexual positions and different things like that. And I think she just wanted it to grow up as a natural part of, what we did and what we thought and all that. But I remember looking at this book and I was very excited about it. So that was the first. Uh, uh, it was right around that time. The other thing that happened was while my parents were separated, there was this woman who, while I spent time with my dad was a military officer. And so he would, and he was in charge of a particular, like a paramilitary type center. And I went there and, we slept in different rooms. And then the next morning, I went very early to, go see my dad. And I just walked in and here he was with this woman, and so I walked in on him and this woman sexually, engaged with each other, and I think that was the first time that I was physically exposed to, to sex, so and then of course afterwards, after my parents got back together, then from time to time I might see Playboy magazines around hidden away somewhere, stuff like that. But those were my first exposures to sex and sexuality.
Okay, so you walked in with your dad, the same thing you was looking in those books. You saw it live and in color.
There you go. There you go.
All right, I appreciate that.
And we never talked about it or anything. It just was. I just knew I shouldn't tell my mom about it. But
okay, so what did you do? Did you close the door quietly? Did you stand there and watch?
I just walked out, and he never brought it up. I never brought it up, but somehow I knew that.
Oh, so he saw you.
No, he knew I was there. He knew.
Okay. All right. Maurice, what about you? Where did you learn about sex?
I don't know. I think I'm a little younger than you guys here. I just got the least hair, but I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and I can remember, as long as I can remember, I would see the girls and the guys outside throwing each other in the fire hydrant, and guys trying to like grab their breast, and same thing at like the public pools as a kid growing up. But my first exposure, I could think, was being a kid and playing catch girl, get girl, which is basically like some blend of hide and go seek and tag, where when you caught a lady, you kind of like try hump them for a little bit and then let her go and run off again. I can remember that for as far back 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. Then we were playing that.
Oh man, you was 5 years old, drive humping people.
And Maurice been dry humping ever since.
And I remember a little bit older, probably around like late elementary school, early middle school. We would play this game called House, and the house was kind of weird too, where like you would be with a young lady and she would be like the wife and you would be the husband, and in essence it was the same thing. Like basically you guys would sneak off somewhere and kind of dry hump. That's probably my first exposure to sex that I could think of. And then kind of like what Isaac said, the internet started getting a little more prevalent when I was in like middle school, and stumbling across different porn websites, or there's a newsstand in particular that sold me and my friends a dirty magazine I used to keep in between my mattress. But that was a little later. Like my first exposure was definitely just growing up in a neighborhood that I was in, and kind of seeing the elders around the neighborhood do it with the ladies, and us as kids kind of imitating it in our own way.
See, all you guys have sort of different experiences on where you learned about sex, the first time you was exposed to it. Now, given that, my next question is, with that experience of learning it through porn, or learning it with your mom being very intentional with giving you books to educate yourself, or learning it through games that you guys played in the neighborhood, what did you learn about sex? We talked about where you learned it. So what did you learn through that experience?
I don't think it was any specific lessons I learned other than it's exciting. It's exciting. It's pleasurable. I think those are the major lessons. I think also, if I'm looking at a video, I don't know any of the people. Um, I'm thinking that I'm learning that there's no real uh, relationship connected to it. So it's more or less just casual and fun. I think that those are the primary lessons I would have to say that I learned from
Okay, I understand. And what about you, Damien?
I noticed that was that all my dad is very dark, right? And and um every instance of a woman, my mom is light skinned, and every instance of a woman that he was around or with or whatever, they were all light, or in that one case where I walked in, white, you know. And so th- so it sent that message that somehow um lighter skin was somehow more appealing or attractive. You know, you also saw that in the movies. You also saw that in the Playboy books. You know, it was white women, or in the movies, we saw American movies mostly, it was white women, or light skinned women, you know. So that sent another message as well.
Oh, thank you.
Last thing I'm going to say, and I'm being a little long winded, but last thing I'm going to say is
No, no, it's okay.
the other thing was that my first actual exposure to actual sex was a summer that I was 14 years old. And there I am in these Sunday school classes, and one of the Sunday school teachers was 16. I was 14, you know, and I'm starting to get more exposure to the Bible and all that. And I'm like, I agree with this, I don't agree with that, stuff like that. And then by the few weeks into the vacation Bible school, me and this Sunday school teacher end up hooking up right in the church itself, and that was my loss of virginity in a church building.
You said the Sunday school teacher?
She was like a vacation Bible school teacher. She was like 16 years old, right?
Okay.
And so it just sent a message about, look, I wasn't a Christian. I didn't believe in God. I wasn't trying to pursue any relationship with God, but she was. And she was teaching something, but living in a different way. And so for me, there was a juxtaposition between what the church and the Bible and all that was supposed to be saying, and the different behavior that was being expressed on the other hand. And they were two different things, right? And so there was the sense of sex being a natural thing, which my mom tried to expose me to. But on the other hand, I was starting to get the sense that sex was somehow also a taboo thing, right? And it wasn't something that you could or should fully follow your instincts on, right? Like my dad shouldn't have fully followed his instincts as it relates to sex. And in the church, you shouldn't follow fully. I mean, like, it was a little confusing of a message, So,
thanks. Yeah, it's Vacation Bible School. I remember Vacation Bible School. We went on a vacation. Maurice, I want you to answer that question, but I also want you to follow up with this question. An answer to this question. After you talk about what you learned, also go into what type of peer pressure, if there were peer pressure to have sex, what was the peer pressure? How did you feel it? How did it come across?
Yeah, and for me, I think what I was taught about sex was if you weren't having it, you were a nerd or a loser or uncool or something like that. Again, for as long as I can remember, I can remember older guys walking up to me and saying things like, "Young boy, what color is a vagina?" And if you got it wrong, them laughing and pointing and teasing you and things like that. I can remember as I got older, um, every time you would talk to a girl, they'd be like, "Oh, you hitting that? You hitting that?" This is me in middle school. I wasn't even interested in sex in middle school. You hitting that? You hitting that? And me being like, "You a virgin, huh? You don't get none, young boy," or things like that. So I think I was very much taught that if you're not engaging in sexual intercourse, you're not cool, and if you are engaging in sexual intercourse, you are cool. And it kind of bring that into the next question. That was the pressure for me and growing up was like I need to have sex and I need to have a lot of it in order to be identified as someone that's cool, to be able to fit in with the quote unquote cool or popular crowd. And things on that nature. And, I'm not like Damon. I wasn't, in no Sunday school playing hooky from Sunday.
It was vacation Bible school, man. Get it right. It was the summertime.
So I wasn't doing that or anything, but I my first relationship I got into, my first girlfriend I was 14. I didn't have sex with her. With my next girlfriend when I was 15, within like 3 weeks she and I was having sex, and every opportunity I got I slept with her. And, I wasn't dealing with a bunch of women back then. I did believe at that time in my life that sex had to be done in the confines of a relationship. I didn't really think that women enjoyed sex at that time in my life, because all I knew was men need to have sex to be cool. I didn't learn that probably until I got to college, honestly, that, women enjoy having sex as well. But I think the pressure for me was have sex or be identified as a loser. That was a huge, huge, huge thing. So I associated sex with sex in like status. You have the more sex you have, the better status that you have. So when I started having sex, it was like, yeah, I've been hitting that for a long time now. I get to brag about this now. And I'm in that in crowd, Now I'm that guy pointing at younger people, talking about how they aren't getting none and things like that. So that was my personal exposure.
And Isaac, what about you? When it comes to like peer pressure and in sex, what was your experience? And if there was experience, can you describe it? Whether it was blatant or more hidden?
So my experience is probably unique in this group, being that I never went to school until 9th grade. I was homeschooled through 8th grade. So my exposure to peers was limited besides sports. I played sports probably since I was 6 or 7. But as far as spending a lot of time with peers, just hanging out with them and no one else, or without adult supervision, was very limited. The other thing was, from the time I could read, which was around 3 or 4, my parents taught me to be my own person and not follow the crowd. So peer pressure I'm also the oldest of 9. My parents have been married 41 years. I have 9 children together. And so I have 6 younger brothers. We always more or less had our own social circle in the house where we didn't need that outside peers to have activities or have someone to play with. Now, as far as the peer pressure, yeah, it was the same as what Maurice was saying. People joking about, oh, you're not getting none, et cetera, et cetera. The other factor that impacted my life was I was a star athlete in pretty much whatever sport I was playing, baseball, football. So even in high school, when I'm getting these jokes, I'm the star athlete as well as the highest achieving academically. So while they would have these jokes, they kind of left me alone because they knew that I was going to I would take it out on them in football, run them over, tackle them, So yeah, they would make these jokes, but generally they kind of say, okay, Isaac, yeah, we understand he's not getting none, but he's all right. So the peer pressure kind of was intentionally directed at other people, even if it was some of the same things that I was not doing. And so I was able to more or less move in and out of every circle where I didn't have a specific social circle that I rolled with. And so, you know, let's say my parents had also made it clear to me that in our household, we weren't having any boyfriends or girlfriends until we were 18. So I knew that was out. My mom didn't work. So it wasn't like I was going to come home and, you know, there'd be a open house to have company over. I also knew that I wasn't just going to be able to hang out. You know, as soon as school ended, I had to come right in, check in. You know, now most of the time I was practicing the sport, and so I would school end at 3, practice starts at 3:30, ends at 5:30. But I still had to come directly home after practice, and it wasn't like, okay, I'm checking in. Okay, mom, I'm going out. It'd be okay. Where are you going? With who and for how long? And so that restrictions on peer pressure affected me as much. Now, I definitely received the message that if you aren't having sex or messing with girls, you're uncool. But due to other accomplishments, I was kind of allowed to navigate all of the social circles without that same stigma of you're not cool enough to hang with us.
It's so interesting how everybody experience is kind of different when it comes to that. And when it comes to young men and sex, do you think boys or do you think young men, is it often seen as a time to perform? Do you see it as an expression of emotion? Do you think that they feel like it's a way to build intimacy, or is it just a way to satisfy their horniness? And I'm just asking to think in general with like what black men are taught about sex, and how a lot of us might approach it when we're young.
For younger kids, I don't think it's really performance based. I think it's more, I'm horny, I don't want to get teased. For adults like ourselves, I would say it is more about an expression of emotion, more of a form of intimacy. And in some cases, a time to put on a performance, but it depends on who that woman is that you're sleeping with, right? So if it's your wife, you're probably going to be more inclined to use it as intimacy, to show emotion and, you know, to put on a performance. If it's just some random woman that you having the urge with, it could be times where it's just a time to satisfy your horniness. I do think it varies, you know, from situation to situation.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Isaac, Isaac, you can answer that same question if you want, but I also have another question for you. Now, with all that we spoke about, and with like the sexual education of Black men, how do you think that influences the way we approach relationships and see women?
So, I guess my answer would be a combination of answering both questions. So, I think that from my personal experience and the experience of my social circle, the majority of the purpose or our focus in sexual experience was for our own pleasure, which is more or less to scratch an itch, more or less, release horniness. The intimacy part didn't cross our minds until later in life, probably late 20s to early 30s. I think that to transition from a mindset of scratching an itch or getting some sort of pleasure for one's own self, then we would need to coach or teach the younger generation that it's a lot more significant than just seeking some sort of personal gratification or fulfillment. And I think that that is a message that we often don't pass down, because I think that there's a lot of taboo connected around sex that we don't really know how to address. How do we say this is healthy, this is right, but it should be done in this context, when the majority of us are not in that context? So if we're saying that it needs to be done in a monogamous relationship or within a marriage, if the majority of us are not in a marriage or not even in a monogamous relationship, then we're saying that the majority of us are not eligible. Well, I don't think that most of us are going to want to say that we should be disqualified. And so then we have to requalify who is eligible and who is not, which then leads to a focus on pleasure and fun more so than on a intimate connection. So to this day, I'm 38. Me and my dad have never had any conversation regarding sex or sex in relationships. It just hasn't happened. And like I mentioned, my parents have been married 40 something years. So, you know, I'm around him all the time, but it's not a conversation that comes up. And I don't think it really became discussed as a level of intimacy until with my friends and peers until we were in our 30s. So prior to that, it was just something to do, more almost like, you know, I know this is sad to say, but almost like playing a sport. So, hey, you gonna go play ball tonight? You gonna go see so-and-so tonight? She coming over tomorrow? And so I think that we need to have these conversations with younger men or younger guys, probably around 10, 11, about what are the ramifications to sexual relationships. I think that there is pain involved for males as well as females when we are treating it as a casual engagement rather than a intimate one. My other thought is, can a 12, 13, maybe even up to 17 or 18-year-old male even have a intimate relationship? Not to say that they can't, but if that's not the focus, then you're heading in the wrong direction. And so I think we need to inform the younger generation of the comprehensive nature of relationships and the aspect that sex plays in those relationships, rather than thinking that we can separate it into various compartments: a sexual relationship, friendship, and I think that that's what we need to do a better job of as males.
Come back for part 2 of the discussion, the sexual education of Black men, where the ladies come in and put the men on a hot seat.